Hey everybody, good morning, welcome, thanks for joining us. My name is Nick, and we are excited and happy to have you join us. Those of you who are on Facebook and YouTube, thanks for taking a couple moments to just hang out with us here today, and we're glad that you joined us. If you're wanting to find out a little bit more about this church and this video that you've kind of stumbled across here, you can always go to our website at findpathways.com, and we've got some information about who we are online there to kind of introduce ourselves. Obviously, the easiest way to get to know us is just to kind of hang around in person a little bit and get to know the people who are involved in this group. But if you want to who are these guys before I meet them directly, we have our core values listed in the bottom of the screen here. We consider ourselves kind of a traveling group of pilgrims who are just on a journey of faith, and we're trying to discover what it means to follow Jesus more. We're trying to discover how do we interact with God and reflect the values of God and allow Him to live through us. And so as we are traveling on this journey together, we've decided there's a few things that we just want to stop and value along the way. And you can read about those on our website if you want to get to know us a little bit more and find out what we mean by some of those things. Now, we obviously describe ourselves usually just real quickly in a couple words. I said this pretty much every week, the word cautious and curious. We are cautious because many of us are familiar with religion, have grown up in religion, been around religion, and we've seen it used for some really good things, but we've also seen religion used for some really bad things. And so many of us find ourselves a little bit skeptical of organized religion. And but that doesn't mean we're not curious about Jesus or about God or about the Bible. We are very curious, and many of us have made a commitment to follow Jesus with our lives, but that hasn't answered all of our questions. We think actually being involved in faith means that you ask a lot of questions, and so we want to do that. We want to practice that as a group. And if you hang around this group for any period of time, you'll notice that we do tend to ask a lot of questions of God, about our beliefs, about the Bible text itself, and we think that's a really good thing. So if you like asking questions, if you find yourself a little bit skeptical of things, this might be a fun group for you to spend some time with. Now, an update today, we are back in person as well. Obviously, you aren't. You're watching this online, but we are gathering in person today as well. We took a couple weeks off during this month just because COVID cases were going through the roof. There's people even still in our church community that are home sick with COVID, and so we're just praying that you stay healthy. If you haven't been sick yet, we're praying you just don't get it, and if you have been sick, we're praying that you get better very quickly. But of course, we're always doing this thing online, so whether we're in person or online, if you're someone who lives remotely and doesn't ever join us in person, things don't change for you a whole lot. Now, if you've been doing this online thing for us a while, you kind of know what's coming next, but I'll just give you a little bit of a tour guide update here. What we're going to do next is we're going to sing a couple songs. Our worship leader, Billy, is going to lead us in a couple songs. In between is kind of a reflective prayer video. And then after that, we will do our sermon time. I'll come back. We're doing a series on the book of Ruth right now, and it's a really fascinating read, and so I'll be talking about that. And then at the end of that, our time, we'll be taking communion together. And so this would just be a good time to go scrounge up some items around the house that you might need to do communion. If you want to find some bread or some crackers or some for the cup, some juice or some leftover wine or something like that. Dry January is almost over, so perhaps you have a bottle of wine laying around the house. If you want to open that up, and at the end of our time, we'll make some room to take communion together if you want to do that. Okay, that's pretty much it. I want to get into this whole thing today because I love the book of Ruth. I think it's super fun. There's all sorts of just like insights that detonate in this book for me. And so can't wait to get to that. So Billy, why don't you lead us in some singing, and then after that, we'll get into the message today. All right, Billy, take it away.
Let praise be a weapon that silences the enemy. Let praise be a weapon that conquers all anxiety. Let it rise. let praise arise. We sing your name in the dark and it changes everything. We sing with all we are and we claim your victory. Let it rise, let praise arise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, let faith be a song that overcomes the raging sea. Let faith be a song that calms the storm inside of me. Let it rise, let faith arise, let it rise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, this is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. We'll see you bring down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, God, we give you praise. of all songs is the song we sing. Song of our sounds, heaven's symphony. Songs of love to you from us all. Songs of praise, you're the one we adore. We're gonna sing out aloud as heaven is us and comes down in this day that we live. We'll show our love with such awesome praise. You are great and greatly to be praised in all the earth, in all the earth. You are strong and powerful in all the world, in all the heavens. You are God, so wonderful. All of heaven knows your name. You are great and greatly to be praised. Sing song of all. Song of all songs is the song we sing. Sound of all sounds, heaven's symphony. Songs of love to you from us all. Songs of praise, you're the one we adore. We're gonna sing out aloud as heaven is us and comes down in this day that we live. We'll show our love with such awesome praise. You are great and greatly to be praised in all the earth, in all the earth. You are strong and powerful in all the world, in all the heavens. You are God, so wonderful. All of heaven knows your name. You are great and greatly to be praised. Sing that again. You are great and greatly to be praised in all the earth, in all the earth. You are strong and powerful in all the world, in all the heavens. You are God, so wonderful. All of heaven knows your name. You are great and greatly to be praised. Yeah, you are to be praised. We're gonna sing it out loud. Let's sing, you are great. You are great, greatly to be praised in all the earth, in all the earth. You are strong, powerful in all the world, in all the heavens. You are God, so wonderful. All of heaven knows your name. You are great and greatly to be praised. You are great
All right. Thanks, Billy. It's good to get going here. Hey, I was thinking this week, just going through some old books that I have. You got some of those? I was going through some books in the garage, and I found I got all these Hardy Boys. Anybody ever read the Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew? I had all these Hardy Boys, and I brought them home because, as you get older, your parents just want you to take everything out of their house instead of leave it there. So I brought these books home. I got all these Hardy Boys books, and I was looking through those, kind of reminiscing. But I found in that box some books that I just love. I mean, they're some of my favorite books as a kid. And those were the Choose Your Own Adventure books. You remember those? Those Choose Your Own Adventure ones where you got to kind of like flip through and then you get to the end of a page and it'd say, hey, if you want to do this, turn to page 29. But if you want to do this, turn to page 64. And the story would change depending on what you chose. I mean, you remember those, the Choose Your Own Adventure things? Loved those as a kid, because it felt like you got to sort of participate in the story. It wasn't just, reading along some predetermined script, but you actually got to choose at least some aspects of how the story went. And every choice that you made led to a different outcome or a different result. And life itself is sort of like that, isn't it? I mean, there's lots of things that happen in life that are outside of your control. I mean, you can't do anything to change them. But there are many choices in our life that we can make, that we can control. Life is sometimes happening to you, but life isn't just happening to you. You are participating in it. You are choosing part of your own adventure. And we are going to see that today, some choices like that in our story. Lots of them, actually. We're doing a series here called Undocumented Love, Crossing Borders in the Book of Ruth. And we are studying this little book of the Bible called Ruth. It's kind of silly to call it a book, really. It's just a short story, and it is worth a read. I mean, first of all, it is short, okay? I mean, you could read this whole thing in 15 minutes or less. It's a definite short story, quick, easy to read, but it's also really good. You think, oh, it's the Bible, but no, it's really, really good. In fact, some people, just from a literary standpoint, have called the book of Ruth, the short story of Ruth, the greatest short story ever written. Okay, I mean, Bible or no Bible, just from a literary standpoint, it is just a fantastic short story. And it's a book that is all about love. And not like the romantic love. Sometimes we paint this story as a story of romantic love. It's not really that kind of love. We're going to start discovering what this love is. But it's a love that's this like fierce, other-centered, loyal, sacrificial. You know what it is? It is a rule-breaking love. And this is a story where people make some choices. Life is happening to them, and yet in the middle of everything that is happening, people make their own choices. They start to choose their own adventure, and it changes their lives. And actually, it changes history. Now, to get you caught up when we previously left off, we need some imaging for this, right? Like, do we have some imaging for this?
Previously on
Ruth. Just some very fantastic imagery there. Can we hear that one more time?
Previously on
Ruth. I mean, we are obviously very high-tech and very professional here, right? Previously on Ruth, okay? If you missed out on some of the rest of the story, you can go back and read it. It's only 5 verses. But as we started this story, we discovered a family. We met a family. It was a man, a wife, and 2 boys. They lived in a place called Bethlehem. Yes, the city where Jesus was born, a city that means house of bread. But we learned very early on that there's some irony in this story, because in the city called house of bread, we discovered there is no bread. There's a famine that's going on. And so because the famine gets so bad, this family decides to leave the country to move to a foreign land called Moab. And so they arrive there empty-handed. They are famine refugees. They're immigrants. They show up with nothing. They're completely empty-handed. They're there hoping that they can survive leaving the place of famine that they come from. But of course, it goes from bad to worse, right? They're not just famine refugees, but once they get there, the husband, Elimelech, dies. And so he is dead, and it's now just the wife and her 2 sons. They're not married yet, and so the wife has to arrange marriages for her sons. And the only people living there are other foreigners, and so she marries her sons off to these Moabite women, which, as we'll learn in the story, probably was a bit of a hard pill to swallow for her. But 10 years passes. They live there in Moab as refugees for 10 years. But in this 10 years, the boys are married, and they have no children. And then, to make matters worse, both sons died. And so now we're left with 3 women: Naomi, the mother, and Ruth and Orpah, the 2 daughters-in-law. And all the males in the family are dead. And this is a huge problem, because in a patriarchal society that they live in, there isn't much hope for these 3 women. They are going to be pushed to the margins. They are going to be vulnerable, powerless, poor, and often mistreated without any males to protect them. And truthfully, there are a lot of sad stories like this, even in the world today. People who live very vulnerable, poor lives out of sight of many of the rest of us. But what's so fun about this story is the Bible won't push the story of these women off to the margins. The story of Ruth is going to be the Bible's way of shining a giant spotlight on these women and their circumstances. You see, because the women here in the part we're about to read today are going to take control of the storyline. Now, the book, or the short story, it starts with the men. But it is not the story of these men. They are killed off very quickly, and it becomes the story of these women. Now, up to this point, everything that's been happening has been happening really to Naomi. She's been sort of passive, right? Things have been happening to her. We learned early on that her husband died, and the text told us that she was left with her 2 sons, right? Something passive happened to her. Her husband died, so she was left with her 2 sons. And then her husband dies, and the text says that she was left without her husband or her 2 sons. And so the only thing we discover here about Naomi early on is that she's getting left. Things are happening to her. Life is happening to her. Bad things are happening to her. But as we pick up the story today, we begin to see a series of active verbs for Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law. Some conscious actions where they are going to grab the storyline here. And some of these choices that they make may not seem like a big deal. They might seem rather small or insignificant in the moment. And I guess I would say that many of our choices today seem that way sometimes too. But the choices that these women make ends up affecting and changing everything. And so what we want to do today is look here at the rest of the first chapter of Ruth. And we are going to see these choices that these women make, okay? It is a choose your own adventure title book, right? Okay, you like those books here? We're going to see all these choices that these women make. And some of them seem small, some of them seem really large, but all of them play into what is about to happen in this story. So let me share you, there's a bunch of them here, so let's just kind of rip through them pretty quick. The first choice that we see right at the beginning is that Naomi chooses to get up. Now, the first words of our text today show a change in direction of the story, and it tells us that Naomi arose. Ruth 1, verse 6 says, Then she, that's Naomi, Naomi, arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the land of Moab, for she had heard in the land of Moab that the Lord had visited his people in giving them food. The first verb that we see there in verse 6 is that Naomi chooses to arise. She is going to get up. Now, there's actually 2 choices that she makes in this verse here, but let's just look at the first one. Naomi arose or got up. She chooses to get up again. And you think, well, that's not really very much of an action, right? I mean, so she just got up in the morning? I mean, that was her big choice here. I mean, it doesn't seem like a big deal just to kind of get up in the morning. But if you've been through a time of loss and grief, you probably know that just the act of getting up again can feel heroic. You know, sometimes just getting up again when you've been knocked down is a major win in and of itself. And when you've been knocked down and when you've experienced grief like that, and I know some of us have, when you've been hit sideways by grief and lost that way, sometimes the choice just to get up is the biggest choice you can make. And maybe there will be bigger choices to be made, and we'll discover that here. But sometimes big things start with something really small. And this year, it's a small choice just to get up again. But all the other choices in this story start here with the choice to get up. It sets the table for all the other choices. Just be willing to get up again. One more day. Get up. And on this day, when Naomi gets up, something happens. Naomi hears that the famine is over in Bethlehem. And there's an interesting phrase here in verse 6. It says that she heard in the land of Moab, right? Do you see that there? She heard in the land of Moab that the Lord had visited his people in giving them food. And literally, it says she heard in the fields of Moab. And what we're going to see in this story is it's really interesting, the interaction that we discover with women in the fields. It turns out in this short story, very creatively put together by this author, that it's in the field where we see women's character revealed. Now at the city gates, that's where the men gather together for legal arrangements and all this other kind of stuff. But it's in the field where we see God at work with women. And it's in a field far from home that Naomi hears the good news about the famine being over. And so now she's going to make another choice here in this text. And that is the other choice in this verse, which is that she is going to choose to go home. She wakes up, hears the news, the famine's over, and so she makes a decision to turn back from Moab and go home. And this is pretty significant because if you think back to the beginning, her family moved to Moab because of the famine. But you wonder, was the decision to move to Moab her choice? Well, we don't know if she had any input on that choice, but probably not. In a patriarchal society, it was probably the decision of her husband. But the choice to return home is all hers. And she chooses now to move. She believes that God is doing something back in Bethlehem, and she makes the choice to go home. Verse 7, so she departed from the place where she was, there in Moab, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. Now, it's one thing to make a decision in your mind, right? Hey, I'm going to do this. But it's another thing to actually put feet to it. And so Naomi very quickly moves from the idea of moving back to Bethlehem to actually putting feet to her decision, and she hits the road home, the road from Moab to Bethlehem. And so she's heading back to Bethlehem, and she takes her 2 daughters-in-law with her. They pack whatever they have. They must say goodbye to their decade-long home here, the place where all of their husbands are buried. And you wonder, was it hard to leave? I mean, for Naomi, was it hard to leave? I mean, I know this isn't really your home. It's a place where you've experienced great suffering, but sometimes it's hard to move. It's hard to say goodbye. Moving can be hard, even if you want to leave. This is a big choice, but she's going to take the road home to Bethlehem. And so along the way, she makes another choice. All right, here we go. Third choice here. Naomi chooses what is best for her daughters-in-law. Okay, now let me unpack this one, okay? Because this is a pretty big choice that she makes here. They're packed. They're headed out of town, right? They're already, I don't know, they got a U-Haul or something. They're on the road, right? Heading back to Bethlehem. They're going to Israel. But somewhere, and it appears probably very early on in this trip, Naomi pulls off the highway and has a conversation with her daughters-in-law. Let's read it here, verse 8 and 9. And Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. May the Lord grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. Now, this is an interesting scene Because what Naomi does here is she makes a decision for her two daughters-in-law, and she tells them, go. I want you to go back home. This isn't home for you anymore. You need to go back home to your parents' house, your family of origin. And you kind of wonder, as you're reading this story, did Naomi plan this in advance? Was her plan like, let's get out on the road first, and then I'll tell them to go home? Because if I tell them here, they won't want to leave. They'll try to convince me to stay. But if we're already out on the road, I'll just send them with their stuff that's already packed and send them. Was this pre-planned? Or does it just sort of come to her as they're traveling? No, we don't really know. But Naomi tells her daughters-in-law to leave her, to not follow her back to Bethlehem, but to go back to their families. And on the face, it sounds a little harsh, but she's telling them this not because she doesn't love them, but precisely because she does. And this is actually our first example of chesed, or love. This type of fierce, loyal, other-centered love. A love that doesn't think about yourself first, but thinks about the other person. Because Naomi here realizes that these women have very little chance for life in where she is going. She is going home, yes, but she isn't really going home to live. She's going home to die. It may be home, but it won't be the home that she left. As she gets back to Israel, she's returning as a widow, to live the life of a widow. And if they follow her, they will be widows too. And what's more, they're going to be foreigners. They won't be looked on very kindly. And they're probably apparently considered barren because they haven't had any children. So that's a lot of strikes against them. And she's just kind of thinking in her mind, there's no life for them there. And she wants better for them than what she can offer them in Bethlehem. Now, having them with her may have been helpful to Naomi herself. To travel alone is going to be dangerous. As a widow, she is going to be extremely vulnerable. And so even though they aren't males, at least having some company along the way would be useful to her. But she knows it's better for them if she sends them back to their families in hopes that they can find some sort of life. This is a big choice because this negatively impacts Naomi. But it is a choice that is made as an act of love, where Naomi is choosing what is best for her daughters-in-law. In fact, she even gives them two blessings in here, they're really beautiful, actually. The first one she says in verse 8 is, "May the Lord deal kindly with you." And it's kind of hidden here in English, but this word kindly, that is our Hebrew word chesed, or love. It's sometimes translated loving kindness, or here it's translated deal kindly. But it is this idea of this radical, other-centered, sacrificial type of loyal love. It's actually the word that's used to describe how God makes covenant with his people. He loves them. He will be faithful to them. And Naomi's saying, you've done that. You've been so loyal and kind and sacrificial and with my sons and with me, and I'm praying that the Lord will do that with you. And then she prays them another blessing, may you find rest. And this isn't because they're tired and they've been traveling. No, it's this idea not of comfort or get some good rest. It's this idea of security, that maybe they could find a new husband, or perhaps they'll find at least protection in their family of origin. This word rest is the same word that's used to describe the people of God's experience in the Promised Land, coming to a place of rest, of security and belonging. And that is what Naomi is praying as a blessing over these two women, that they will find security somewhere. This is a big choice for her, to release them, though they are bound to her. And now we find a choice that is made, this time not by Naomi, but by these daughters-in-law. And the daughters-in-law, they make a choice to disobey. And this is the first action by someone else other than Naomi here. Naomi tells them to go back to their families, and they refuse. Verse 10, and they said to her, "No, we will surely return with you to your people." And this is pretty bold, because these women are sort of bound to Naomi at this point. She is the matriarch here. She is the mother-in-law. They're bound to her, and she gives them an order, and they flatly turn her down and say no. They refuse to leave. And this is one of the first breakings of a rule here. They are refusing a direct request from Naomi. It's kind of an unusual moment. You don't usually disobey your mother-in-law. And so Naomi, though, notices their choice, and she gets more forceful, and it leads to another decision on her part, and that is to be a mother again. Now, we're going to have to unpack this one a little bit, because right up front, it doesn't look like she's being very motherly, right? What we have to notice in this story is there's some tension, okay? Sometimes we think it's like, oh, it's all love and kindness, and there is love between these people, but this appears to be sort of a heated argument, and Naomi loves these girls, it appears, but she sees herself as a mother wanting to protect them, and so she gets more forceful with them. Verse 11 and 12. But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." Now, you can sense that there is a little bit of tension here, right? The women are disagreeing. And Naomi is trying to come across a little stronger now because they have refused her first order to leave. But there's also this weird tenderness that happens. At the same moment of this greater forcefulness comes this greater tenderness, because Naomi's language changes. And I don't know if you caught it there as we read it, but for the first time in this story, she addresses these two women as my daughters. You see that in yellow there? My daughters, both in verse 11, verse 12, and if we flip over, she does it again in verse 13. And previously, Naomi and also our narrator has called them daughters-in-law, or a better translation might actually be bride daughters, right? I didn't give birth to you. I'm not your real mom. You're kind of here because you married my sons, right? But now, instead of calling them daughters-in-law or bride daughters, she changes her language for the first time and calls them my daughters. It's more intimate. It illustrates a relationship that's here. Her care for them. She's choosing in this moment, just by her language change, we can see that she is making a big choice here to see herself as their mother. She's forcing them away, yes, but at the same time, she's drawing them close. Isn't that interesting? It's a conscious choice, apparently, in the way that she chooses to refer to them. Now, we see some foreshadowing in this. She mentions there's some foreshadowing of a law that's going to become really important later on. And I love that when stories do stuff like that, right? Where they foreshadow something. And when you watch a movie the first time, you don't see it. But when you watch it back the second time, you're like, oh yeah, they were totally telling us that they were going to do this later on. And this story is doing that right here. She references this idea of a Hebrew law called the Levirate law. And this idea was that if a husband dies, the brother of that man was supposed to marry the widow and father a child with her, so that that child could grow up, inherit all the land of the dead father, and continue the family line. That's sort of how things had to work in a patriarchal society, because women can't own property or whatever else, so you had to have a male heir. And so if the husband dies, then the brother is supposed to step in, provide a child that can inherit the land. And Naomi is referencing this law, which is going to become really important later. And she's trying to tell them, this is impossible. This law just doesn't apply here. Like, this is how normally we would take care of these situations, but you don't understand. This can't happen now. This law doesn't apply to us because I'm too old to have a son. And even if I did have a son, I mean, you'd have to wait so long before he grew up to marry them. So this law, it just doesn't help us in our case. And so what she's trying to do is spare them the hurt. She's trying to give them their best possible chance, which is, don't stay with me. You need to go back to your family of origin. And so, of course, after her persistence, the daughters then make a choice, and that is to choose their own road. And first, we see that Orpah chooses to do just what Naomi tells her to do, and Ruth refuses to leave and hangs on. So verse 14 and 15, and they lifted up their voices and wept again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law and left, but Ruth clung to her. Then she said, "Behold, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." Now, these two women, we see here that they have their own agency. They have their own ability to make decisions. Their mother-in-law has ordered them to do something, but we see that they take control of their own stories here as well. And Orpah, she chooses to return, just as Naomi has told her to. She returns to her family of origin. But Ruth refuses to leave. She makes another choice and clings to Naomi. And there's a contrast here that the author wants us to see in the story about how the two daughters respond. There's a contrast between the choices that they make. Orpah chooses to go, Ruth refuses to leave. They make their choices. And it's tempting here, as you read the story, to say that Ruth's choice is better than Orpah's, right? You say, well, Ruth was the better daughter-in-law. But that is not at all the contrast that the author wants us to see. Not that one is being less loyal and the other one is being more loyal. In fact, in a certain way, Orpah, by leaving, is being more loyal to Naomi in that she is actually being obedient to what her mother-in-law has told her to do. And so the contrast here isn't that one is more loyal and the other one is less loyal. The contrast here is that Orpah does what is sensible. She does the thing that you should do. She does the thing that makes the most sense. She does the thing that is most rational. She does the thing that is actually most obedient. And the contrast is that what Ruth does is crazy. It's absurd. It's reckless. What she does is not in her best interest. She chooses instead Naomi's best interest. And so we get another demonstration here of chesed, of love that is reckless. It is bold. It is daring. It is almost absurd. And we get this incredible choice then out of this that Ruth makes. And it is this huge declaration about her loyalty to Naomi and her people and her God even. And it's this incredible statement that's read at weddings. You know, it's kind of taken out of context here because this isn't really about romantic love, although it does fit when repurposed for weddings. But it's this beautiful statement. It's a poem actually, and it is Ruth just pushing her chips and saying, I'm all in with Naomi and her God. And it's just one of the most beautiful sections of scripture. It's emotional even reading it, the words of Ruth. They're in verse 16 and 17 here. But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." Wow, that is an incredible statement, isn't there? I mean, there's just so much in this section. There's this beautiful declaration of love and loyalty. And it is clearly a strong commitment to Naomi, right? I'm going to be there for you through thick and thin. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. Wherever you go, I will go, right? It is just a huge, just amazing commitment to Naomi herself. But many have noticed that this isn't just a commitment to Naomi, but that it actually appears to be a conversion moment in the life of Ruth. Because she is embracing Naomi and committing to her, but she is also embracing the God of Naomi. She's embracing the Lord. And in the text there, in the text we get to see, in the text there we get to see where she calls in verse 17, "May the Lord deal with me." And when she uses the word the Lord there, in English it kind of disguises it, but in Hebrew that is the name Yahweh, the personal name of God. And in other places in this text, when God is referred to, it's sometimes the word Elohim, which is just sort of a generic name for God. But here we get the personal name of God, Yahweh. So she is saying, I am committing to your God. And for thousands of years, people have seen this as a conversion story for Ruth. In fact, so much so that many female converts to Judaism often take the name Ruth at their conversion, because this is a pivotal moment. There is a seriousness to it. This is a solemn oath that Ruth takes here. In fact, did you catch that at the end there? If we go to verse 17 at the end, may the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. I mean, can't you imagine as Ruth is saying that? She's like, may the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely. I mean, you can almost see her doing that, right? And then she says, if even death separates us. It's like she even seems to be challenging that death itself could separate her from Naomi and from her God, Yahweh. This is a beautiful moment along the road to Bethlehem. This is the X marks the spot part of the story. You know that? You're going to get the treasure map. X always marks the spot. Something important is buried there. It's like when we get to this section of the story, there should be a big X right there next to this. Because this is where this pivotal moment happens. This is like holy ground. Because everything changes on this decision. Naomi's life is going to change. Ruth's life is going to change. There's some other characters coming in the story whose life is going to change. But fundamentally, the nation of Israel and all of history is going to be changed. And it starts right here, somewhere on the road from Moab to Bethlehem, where Ruth drew an X and decided, I'm all in with Naomi and Yahweh. And it's such a stunning commitment that Naomi is left speechless. Look at this, verse 18. When she saw that she was determined to go with her, she, Naomi, said no more to her. I mean, she falls completely silent. Naomi has nothing left to say. And you wonder why. Was it because she just lost the argument? Was it because she was so in awe of this conversion moment and the declaration that Ruth has made? Or is it that she's so frustrated at her command not being followed? Or is she just quiet because she's sad knowing that Ruth's choice here is going to lead to a lot of heartache? We don't know. But apparently she travels the rest of the way to Bethlehem in silence. That is a long road trip for the silent treatment. But they finally arrive. And when they get there, we discover that Naomi makes one more choice, and it is a hard one to make. Naomi chooses to get real. In verse 19, we see how this happens. So they both went until they came to Bethlehem. And when they had come to Bethlehem, all the city was stirred because of them. And the women said, is this Naomi? She said to them, do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has witnessed against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me? Now they arrive here in Bethlehem, but nobody recognizes Naomi. I mean, they're not looking for a single woman, right? I mean, she left with the family, but she returns alone. Well, she says empty, but she's really got Ruth, right? You kind of wonder when she says, here I am returning empty. I wonder how that made Ruth feel, right? Because Ruth is probably standing right beside her. But the people, they look at Naomi and they notice she's different. She looks different. Life has happened to her. Life has changed her. So much so that Naomi doesn't even want to own her own name anymore. Her name, Naomi, in Hebrew, it actually means pleasant. But Naomi is not feeling very pleasant. She says, you should call me instead Mara, which means bitter. I left pleasant, but I am returning bitter. I'm all alone now, empty. And she makes the choice here to get real, to be real about the pain that she feels. And she says it here publicly in her community. And if you've ever had moments like this, you know this is a hard choice. It's a hard one to make because you're letting people see the struggle on the inside. And it's obvious to them. They can see the effects on the outside, but now she is going to let them on the inside too and vocalize her hurt, her doubts about God. In fact, she even says that God is prosecuting her. It's the only time in the Bible that that verb is used. She is being very vulnerable here about how desperate and just completely downcast she feels. And it is a hard choice to be that vulnerable. You ever been there? Life's happened. People can kind of see it on the outside. But it's a hard choice to let people in on the inside and get real about what's been going on with you. And Naomi makes that choice. But the story doesn't end there. We get a final choice that's made here, not by one of the characters in the story even actually, but one from outside the story. It's the narrator. The author themselves makes a choice. And the narrator chooses to be open to the possibilities of hope. Because we've seen all this stuff that's happened in chapter 1, and it's been pretty much disaster after disaster after disaster. And the narrator here makes a choice that he wants us to see that not everything that's happened here has been awful, but that this is not the end. And so the narrator leaves us with a sort of cliffhanger of hope going into chapter 2. Ruth 1, verse 22, the final verse of the chapter says, "So Naomi returned, and with her Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, who returned from the land of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest." And that last line there is the key part. They came home, and oh, guess what? It was time for the barley harvest. They get to Israel just in time for harvest. There's food again in Bethlehem. And what we learn right here at the end of chapter 1 is Bethlehem, the house of bread, it's finally living up to its name again. And that is a cue here from the narrator that there is hope on the way. There is a deliberate choice here by the narrator to show us so that we can see that there is more happening in this chapter beyond what just meets the eye. Has a lot of bad stuff happened? Yes, but the narrator chooses right in this moment to give us this little cue about the harvest to let us know to hang on because hope is coming. He chooses to tell us to expect hope. And embracing an attitude of hope when things all around us are difficult, have not gone according to plan, when we're mired in grief and despair, to embrace an attitude of hope when all that's happening, that's a choice, isn't it? That's a difficult choice. To choose to believe that there's more at work than just what we can see from our own perspective. To remain hopeful that God sees us, cares for us, even if no one else does. There is a choice here to maintain hope, and the narrator wants us to choose it. There's lots of choices in this chapter. Little ones like just getting up that lead to bigger things and bigger things. Life is happening to them. Things have happened to these women, but they are also showing that they have their own agency. They are making choices, even if they seem small at the time, and these choices are going to influence not only their own lives, but the lives of the whole nation. And so that sort of leaves us here at the end asking, what choices do you have today? I know life may have been happening to you. Things may have been happening in your life that are way outside of your control. Maybe there's all sorts of things falling all around you and you can't fix them, but what choices in the middle of that do you have to make? It could be some of the ones from this story. For some of us, it might just be the simple choice to get up one more day. To get up and hope that perhaps today's the day we'll hear the good news that the famine is over in the fields of Moab. Maybe that's the choice you need to make today. Maybe it's to go home. Some of us, we've been away from home, whether it's a physical place, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it wasn't our fault, maybe it was our fault, maybe it was our choice, maybe it wasn't our choice, but maybe you have a decision to go home. Is that the choice you need to make? Maybe the choice before you today is to do what's best for another person. You know, that's what Naomi did. She looked and saw her daughters-in-law, and even though it was more advantageous to keep them with her, she sent them away. She was trying to give them what was best for them. We see even Ruth do that for Naomi. And perhaps there is someone in your life today that you are faced with the decision, perhaps, to do what is best for them rather than yourself. Is that a choice you need to make today? Maybe it's just to bring someone closer. I mean, Naomi does that, right? I mean, I know she pushes her daughters-in-law away, but then she invites them into her just to let them know how much they mean to her by referring to them as full daughters. And perhaps there's someone in your life today that you need to bring a little closer. You know, the biggest decision in this story was made by Ruth in that holy ground moment between Moab and Bethlehem, where she chose her commitment to Naomi, but more importantly, she chooses her commitment to God. And maybe that's a place where you are today. Maybe you've just been kind of walking around, you've seen people and their love for God, you've seen them demonstrate the love of God, but you've never quite made a commitment to follow Yahweh yourself. And maybe that's a choice you need to make today. Maybe it's just to get real, right? Some of us are just carrying a whole bunch of garbage inside. There's all sorts of stuff going on, and we've never really been vulnerable enough to let people in to see what's going on the inside. And maybe a next step choice for you today is to just get real with someone and let them in. But maybe most fundamentally, it's just maybe a decision for some of us to be open to the idea of hope. That perhaps something good can happen. And we just need to have an attitude expecting that something good can happen. To be open to the possibility that God might step in and do something good. You see, life is happening all around us. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. Lots of it you can't control, I can't control. But while life is happening to you, it's also giving you opportunities to make choices, to sort of choose your own adventure. And sometimes it's a little choice, but it leads to bigger things. But we're never standing still. We're always moving in a direction. And so what's your next step? It's time to flip the page. Where do you want to go next in this story? Let's do it together. You know, God made a choice. He made a choice to become one of us. He made a choice to step into the human condition, not just to look at it from afar and judge us, but to step into what it means to be human. He became a human like us, and he allowed all of life to happen to him. He allowed the worst of life to happen to him. In fact, he allowed evil to do its very worst to him, and it strung him up on a cross. And he made the choice to die for us, and then triumph over that death by coming back to life. And in doing this, in making this choice to become one of us, to die for us, God is giving us a chance to make new choices too. Death is not the end. Whatever circumstance you find yourself in today is not the end. Let's trust God and live into the life he has for us. Hey, Jesus, we want to come to you today, and we want to thank you so much that you do care about us, that you see us. Thanks that you put a giant spotlight right here in the Bible text on people who are poor and vulnerable and taken advantage of easily. We thank you that stories that are often unseen by many of us are clearly seen by you, and you highlight it here. Thank you that though life is happening to us all the time, that you have given us agency to make our own choices. And we pray, God, that maybe you give us courage today just to take one little step, to make one little choice that perhaps could lead to another choice. We know, God, that you go with us in everything, and we're most grateful that you've made the choice to come to us, not waiting for us to get everything right and come to you, but that you made the choice to come to us, and that changes everything. And we go to the communion table today thankful and grateful for all that you've done for us. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. We're going to do communion today. If you'd like to do that, if you got some elements around your house, Billy's going to lead us in a song, a time, just where you can reflect and think. Maybe, just take a screenshot of this, and as he sings, maybe ask yourself, what small choice might I need to make today as we go to the communion table? And then we'll come back for some announcements, okay? Let's go take communion.
Seated above and thrown in the Father's love, destined to die, poured out for all mankind. God's only Son, perfect and spotless one. He never sinned, but suffered as if he did. All authority, every victory is yours. All authority, every victory is yours. Savior, worthy of honor and glory, worthy of all our praise. For you overcame. Jesus, awesome in power forever, awesome and great is your name. You overcame. Yeah. Oh, you overcame. Yeah. Power in hand, speaking the Father's plan. Yeah, sending sound, lighting this broken land. All authority, every victory is yours. All authority, yeah, every victory is yours. Yeah, it's yours. Savior, worthy of honor and glory, worthy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Everyone overcome. We will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Everyone overcome, and we will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Everyone overcome. Yes, we will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Everyone overcome. Yeah. Savior, worthy of honor and glory, worthy of all our praise. You overcame. Jesus, Jesus, awesome in power forever. Awesome and great is your name. You overcame. One last time, sing it out. Savior, worthy of honor and glory, worthy of all our praise. You overcame. Jesus, Jesus, awesome in power forever. Awesome and great is your name. You overcame.
All right. Hey, Billy, thanks for that. Appreciate that. A couple announcements for us as we wrap up. We only have a couple actually today, which is pretty easy. So first of all, if you'd like to give, you can do that if you want to support the Pathways Church financially. You can do that by going online to our website at findpathways.com/donate, and you can do a one-time gift there, or you can set up a recurring gift if you would like to do that too. You could also text in a dollar amount to the number 84321 if you want to do that. But probably online is the easiest way to do that if you want to be involved in that. Also, we do have an email newsletter that we send out to try to keep people up to date with what's going on. Yeah, we're posting on Facebook and Instagram and all that kind of stuff, just trying to get the word out about things that we're doing. But perhaps you don't check those that often. So if you want to just have it delivered right to your email box, you can sign up for our email newsletter. If you want to message us on Facebook with your email address, we'll add you there. Or if you want to email me, my email address is right there on the screen. I'd be happy to add you to our list as well. Those are really our only announcements for today. We are going to be announcing some other new stuff here in the next couple weeks. I don't know. Okay, here's our hope. Our hope is that the COVID surge is going to be going down. I mean, we know it's going down, but we're hoping it just goes way down now. It seems like there's some optimism that we might just be in a much better spot here coming out of this whole thing. We'll see. But what we're hoping is to launch some practice groups here, some kind of midweek groups where we're getting together again, meeting with one another, and practicing a few things. Practicing how to be vulnerable with one another, how to really belong into a group where we share a little bit about ourselves and learn about others. We want to practice how to disagree a little bit, so we'll put some stuff in the group so we're able to express things, disagree, but learn how to stay in the room with disagreement. We also want to practice what it means to be curious and humble when reading the Bible text and exploring that. And so we'll be doing that together in these groups as well. So anyway, we'll have some groups going on. If you're online, we'll probably plant some groups online for people to meet together via Zoom. That's, I guess, the way you do it online. For those of you who are a lot of times local or in person, we'll have some local groups going on again too. So that's what's coming up. Next week, we'll continue on with the series here. There's some pretty interesting stuff that happens in chapter 2. And we'll get into that next week. Okay, hope you have a very great week. I think it's supposed to snow in Seattle again this week, which is just crazy. So anyway, whatever happens with the weather, I hope that you stay safe and have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye.